Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Donald Ross. I'm Director of Learning Solutions for SuccessFactors, which is an SAP company, a global organization. I've been in learning and development now for around about 25 years, doing a number of different roles within that, both from a learning delivery perspective, also in the implementations of systems. And before I actually joined the SuccessFactors business, I was responsible for learning within the SAP business with a part of the organization called SAP Education, which were responsible for delivering learning to the SAP ecosystem. So I've been in and around learning for around about 25 years. So in terms of, we've got about half an hour now, so in terms of what we hope to cover in the next kind of 30 minutes, I want to look at kind of 7 macro human capital trends that I think will really rock your world. That certainly, as I do more and more research into this area, have certainly changed my vision, especially around human motivation, what motivates individuals, whether the environment of work that we've got today will be the environment we've got tomorrow. And I've had throughout my career a real interest in social history. So it's really, really interesting to see how that evolves. I started my career as a statistician at the University of Aberdeen, working in the Regional Centre for the Study of Economic and Social History. So it's always been a real passion of mine. So we'll hopefully be able to look at some historical events, look at how motivation is actually adapting throughout the years, and maybe look a little bit into the future as to what we'll see going forward. The second one that we'll look at is the growth crisis. And we've really seen that hugely since the crash of 2008. And I was working in the City of London at that point, so I was actually in the Lehman's building when all hell let loose. So I've got a little bit of insight around that. So that's the second point. Then I want to talk about the emerging workforce. And it's really totally not what I think or what I thought was the case when I started looking into this. So I want to share a little bit of insight from my perspective. Then we want to talk a little bit about the war for talent, because I always thought the war for talent was there wasn't going to be enough talented people in the world to provide the resources that we as organizations would require to make sustainable profit. But that's not actually the case, so I'll go into a little bit of my view around that. This is really, the next point is that the machines are taking over the world. And as a social historian, even though I'm an amateur social historian, I've always found this hugely interesting. And if you read books back to the turn of not the last century, but the century before, and you actually read at how historians were portraying the machines were taking over the world, you could put that at the turn of any century. For the last kind of 170, 200 years, we've talked about this, but actually the pace of change that we have today has completely outtaken actually the ability for individuals to adapt to that change. And there's an awful lot of research that's been done around that. I then want to talk a little bit about how you as organizations can really adapt to this world. And it's really about people, data and insights. How can you extract the data from your human resources, from your learning systems, from your succession and career development systems, and integrate that with financial data and basically your strategy going forward to make sure that you're really using your people as effectively as you would be using your capital in effect, yeah? And then I want to kind of pull it all together at the end with a little bit of a discussion around collaborative technologies. So that's my kind of next kind of 20 minutes. So I'm going to have to rattle through a little bit. Let's start a little bit with the 7 macro trends. The first one is really, it's a book, it's a bit of a plug because it was the start of my journey. And it's a book called Drive. Now I don't know whether anybody has anybody read Drive? Excellent, well you know what I'm talking about then. It's a book called Drive from Daniel Pink. Yeah, so if you can note that down. And what really amazed me, if I look at the companies that I've worked for over the years, and look at the way that we've historically motivated individuals, and it's really around that carrot or stick methodology, where you basically when you push and reward them, using generally cash incentives for people to do what you want them to do. And then the stick, which is basically you'll take something away from them, whether it be their money or whether it be their bonus or whether they'll be their job itself for not performing the way that you're doing. And then you compare that with actually what motivates people. And what the book is really about, in a few words, is they took a group of individuals and they put them in a room with a task. And what they found was that people were interested in doing the task for the task's sake. So if it was interesting work and they felt they were involved in that work, they would actually carry that work out with a high degree of enthusiasm, if it was interesting and if they felt engaged. And then we added money to the equation and said, well, if you do it quicker, if you do it better, we'll give you more money. And what they found was the quality went down, but the productivity went up. Interesting. And then what they did was, we'll take the money away, and then what they found was, clearly, the productivity went down far below that was the case when they were just doing it for the love of work. Yeah? So that gives some quite insight. So I would absolutely highly recommend, if you're interested in what motivates people in the modern economy, to look at that book, Drive. It certainly gave me a new perspective. The next thing is really the emerging workforce. And what I'm talking about there is the fact that today we really have 6 generations, and you've probably heard this before. And I've seen that certainly with a lot of my friends and peers, where you've got a situation, I mean, you just need to be on the M25 on a Monday morning to see it, every time there's a new release of graduates. You've got a situation where people, for whatever reason, generally it's their pensions or whatever, are having to work longer. You've got new people coming into the workforce. So for the first time in human history, we have today 6 generations of individuals within the workforce. And that's really, really causing us an awful lot of adaptation that's required to allow us to bring these in. One of the things that's really, really interesting, and we've seen this over the last few years, certainly the last 2 or 3 decades, is the feminization of the workforce, which has been absolutely fantastic, I think. And one of the key things around that is it's not only, there's a lot of advantages, obviously, of that, in terms of the way that we approach roles and tasks and everything like that. And also you've got the diversity aspects as well. But what you're also finding is that you've got to find a way of bringing these people into the workforce and adapting their environment to make them stay. So, and actually, if we look forward a little bit, we'll see that actually by the year 2060, there will be more women in work than there will be men. So that's a really interesting statistic as well. So I think it's about how do we actually make it attractive for these individuals to come and to do work. The next thing is, what do they want, in effect? I mean, actually, everybody talks about, well, Generation Y and Generation Z and Generation ZZ wants something different from the work environment. But we did a major piece of work with Oxford University, Oxford Economics, around actually, is there a difference between what these individual parts of the organizations are looking for? And actually, there's not. They're all looking for similar things in terms of they're looking for productive work, they want to feel part of something, they want an experience. But the interesting thing is that the way that the organizations have structured themselves has meant that the ability to actually have a career for life, because the redundancy of skills and the speed of change is adopting so quickly, has meant that actually it is more about an experience for them and how they can create and take control of their own development. So that's another major trend that I'm seeing. The next one is around, which is a huge area that we at SAP have done a lot of work on in the last 10 years to try and reduce the attrition rate. And it's around brand loyalty, and actually getting people to feel part of something. And when I was in financial services, we saw that an awful lot, because pre-2008, the main reward was a cash bonus. It was an annual cash bonus that you got, and it was based purely on the work that you'd done on the previous year. And in fact, if you were quarterly bonused, it was the work you'd done in the previous quarter. So there was no real drive for you to give brand loyalty. So how do you get individuals using the carrot, in effect, to actually feel part? Well, it's about engaging work and all these kind of things. But at the end of the day, if you link reward to long-term incentives so that it's not just about that piece of work or that very singular element of work, it's around what you've done over a period of time, and you feel that actually you're part of an organization. So seems like share issuance. So we've taken at SAP a chunk of our bonus pot and put it into shares over a period of time, and what we're trying to do there is to buy in brand loyalty. And certainly you'd think that people would be quite taken aback by that. Well, hang on a minute, I'm not going to get my full bonus this year. I'm going to have to wait 2 or 3 or 4 years. But actually, the feedback has been completely different. The feedback has been, we feel part of something now. We feel as if we've got part ownership of something now. And that's been really relative and very, very good. The next trend that I'm seeing is the whole machines are taking over. And you probably, if you've read any kind of historical piece on this, you probably have seen the whole piece about the bobbin mills and how the people that were if you've ever been up to Harris, you've seen them still doing the Harris tweed manually, and how that's completely taken over. But actually, the interesting thing is you can apply that to the modern world. And I've got a friend that lives quite close to me, a friend of my wife actually, who was a black taxi driver. Yeah, so he'd done the knowledge, he spent ages on his scooter going around London and learning everything that is. And then of course you've got Uber coming in, and I was in Washington the week before last, and it was the first time I'd used Uber. This is not a plug for Uber, just so you're aware, but it was the first time I'd used Uber, because the first day I got into a cab and the guy took me the longest way around for what was the 10-minute journey from Reston, the city centre, to our offices, the SAP offices, which was, and he'd basically taken me on the motorway and round and everything. And I thought, well, this is no good. So I thought, well, I'll try Uber, because everybody in the office said, oh, you've got to use Uber. And it was amazing. It was really amazing. The technology, you knew exactly where your driver was. You knew where he was coming to at the end of the drive. You'd seen the route that he'd taken, so you could tell it was the quickest route. And then you had to rate him. And these ratings, obviously, they were keen. They were out the car door. They were opening the door for you, taking your luggage. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, it's like performance-related pay for taxi drivers, isn't it? It was absolutely incredible. But at the end of the day, for the black taxi driver, that's a real piece of competition, and you've seen it. But what this friend of my wife said, what they've done is, they got 2 or 3 of these taxi drivers coming together, and they've set up, because they were interested in technology, a new web environment. And basically what they're using is the knowledge and adapting that into GPS methodology for mapping. So what they're using is their technology brain, is the knowledge that they've got to look at the fastest ways based on the traffic and a pile of algorithms to get them to where they need to get to. And they're selling that technology back to Uber. So that's a way of looking at, how can we take an environment where you think, oh my God, the machines are taking over, to actually, how can we adopt our working practices to get to a situation where actually we are contributing in that new environment. Just a little bit of food for thought there. I mean, the next one is social learning. I remember when I started at SAP, in fact, when I started work, there was no, well, I think we were on DOS 6 or something like that, and there's probably a lot of people shaking their head wondering what that is. But look, it was the pre-Windows, and we had one laptop in the whole of the building, and it looked like a brick. It really, really was. And we've seen how that's adopted over the years. But if you look at how you use social technology, I mean, it used to be, if you were in an office, you'd turn to the people that were round about you and you'd ask a question, and then we had email, and then you'd spam everybody in your office to try and find somebody that knew. And I'm getting some nodding heads, which is clearly good. But now we're in a situation, and we implemented our version, which is called Jam, but whatever social learning we're talking about here, we're talking about the ability to put up on a total system, and we've got nearly 80,000 employees, and we're able to ask questions. And if you've got the light setup within your social technology, which most people don't, but they adapt over time when they get inundated with all these questions, you get to a situation where the stuff that you're getting is appropriate to you, and then you're able to respond. So one of the things that we did within our solution for helping with our key partners, people like IBM and Accenture, and people that implement our systems, was what they were saying was, it's great to come on a 2-week course, fantastic, where you get a book, you put it on a shelf at the end of it, and that's the end. So it's basically, it's not a journey, it's an event. Yeah, so we were running classroom courses, they came in at the beginning, they went away at the end. What we've done with social technology, which has really revolutionized what we're thinking about, is we're able to reach out to our customer base before the course takes place. We're able to create an environment when you can discuss with the tutor what you're looking to get out of the course. So if there's 10 people in the course, the tutor's got quite a bit of pre-work to do, getting a feel for who's actually going to be on the course. We're even getting people to put up videos and a little bit of an introduction so that everybody on the course can get a feel for who's going to be on it on their first day. And then during the course, we're able to set questions, and we're able to get dialogue and what's going to be on the next day of the course. And then at the end of the course, we've got an alumni where people can basically keep together and keep debate. And one of the things that I've got the tutors doing, which is revolutionized, is they're incentivized to basically engage with their alumni by running kind of update webinars and tricks and tips and frequently asked questions to make people and draw people back into that site. So it no longer is a single event, it's a journey. And the feedback that we've got from our customer base has been huge on that. The other thing that's really, really interesting is that one of the things that the alumni had a real issue with, or the channel had a real issue with, is you can imagine Sunday night, you're going into a consulting opportunity, or you're going into an engagement with a customer the next day, and you need some information desperately. Well, other than kind of phoning and emailing and hoping somebody would pick it up, it was very, very, very difficult to do that. But with this social technology, we've now got learning groups with thousands of people on different technologies. So there's 200,000 people now using the solution to basically engage around SAP products and services. So what they're now able to do is put in a question, and what I'm getting feedback from the customers is that they're actually getting responses to these, not from people within SAP, potentially it might be, but within other providers, which is really, really good. So it's really creating that society, if you like, of learners that are keen to engage and help each other. The next one is, and this really goes back to what I was talking about with the war on talent. And kind of touching a little bit further on the war on talent, my view is that the war on talent is not a lack of talent. We have a lot of talented people around the world. It's getting these talented people in the right place at the right time doing the right stuff. Yeah? And I've seen that so much with many of the organizations that I've worked with over the years, whether it be in the financial services, the manufacturing industry. Big global organizations really have an issue with staff retention, where there is opportunities for individuals to move globally if only they knew about these opportunities. Does that resonate with anybody? Does anybody kind of think, yeah, that's a few kind of nods around the room? And what is really evolving that is a lot of the technology that's around succession and career development. Who has solutions in place or technology in place to manage that whole succession and career development element? Is there anybody? I mean, just to kind of give you a little bit of insight into the evolvement of that, when we put that in, and we bought SuccessFactors. SuccessFactors was an independent company. We at SAP bought the organization. I was heavily involved in the implementation of learning, and learning clearly integrates with compensation, it integrates with onboarding, it integrates with whatever. But the interesting thing was, when we put that up, nobody used it. Nobody used it. We then incentivized people to come and put your information in, and it will give you the ability to to find other opportunities and roles. And it was a real winning of the hearts and minds globally, because you had HR managers that actually were going to the local recruitment agent to recruit somebody. So the externals were getting preference over the internals, and there was a real lack of drive. But the real change, I think, was the high-level support. And you've got to have high-level support, I think, when you're implementing these type of solutions. So it certainly revolutionized the way that we viewed, and today, and we're 3 years into that project, it's changed the way that we actually do succession and specifically recruitment. So we're finding that actually between our academy program and between our succession and career development programs, 60% of job hires are actually from internal as opposed to external. And yes, there is an awful lot more moving of individuals around the world than there were ever, but you want to really try and retain your top talent, and I think that's key. And then finally, people insights, which is around the requirement for analytics and what that can bring to the table. So I just want to look at very, very quickly on the human productivity crisis and give a bit of a view for that. We talked a little bit about that in terms of human productivity was very much at its peak in 2008, and we've seen that drop significantly. And the key impact of that, and you're probably aware, you just need to watch Newsnight to get the feel of that, or any of the economic programs, is that GDP numbers are falling. Yeah? It's really, really, really slowing. If you look at no matter what market you look at the evolving countries, the BRIC countries, the mature countries such as the European countries or America, we've seen that there is a definite slowing of GDP growth. And that clearly, if you think about it, has an effect on our way of life. And why I'm saying that is, if GDP is slowly going down, but the same money is there to be shared throughout individuals in the economy, and I don't know whether anybody actually saw, there was a referendum recently in Switzerland. Did anybody note that? Where they were basically looking at, how do we get around this whole piece around there's not enough roles to give everybody a job? You know, and I think actually you'll see an awful lot more debate around that, around how we evolve as a society. So if you think about that, and you think about the next steps in that, how does that apply? Because I think that's the first country, but I think you'll see many, many more. And if you actually look at the statistics, and there's an equation called the Clem's Multifactor Productivity measure, which would probably take an hour or two to explain, but do look it up, it's well worthwhile. And the inputs to that are capital, labour, which is a factor of labour per capita, and it's a standard of living measure, and intermediate inputs, you will see what effect this is having. And it's been that effect since World War II. We have seen a significant slowdown. You've seen the emerging economies at the top there. We've seen an actor of the world economies there, and then we're seeing a dip in the advanced economies. But if you look at that factor, you'll see that the common trend is that it's going down. And that will have an effect on everybody's living environment, living experience. And what you'll see is, you'll see a coming together of that, so that there's an equalization of wealth throughout the world as these economies, the emerging economies, catch up on us over time. Yeah? Additionally, we've got, and we talked about that earlier, aging, so the aging population, more people being in work, yeah, is definitely, absolutely definitely making it harder and harder to sustain growth. So now let's look at some of the factors that you within your organization can use to turn that around. So what's the solution? The solution is very much what we call PIEP, or PEIP, sorry, which I think is the solution that will save the world. I'm feeling a bit like an evangelist here. I have a dream. No, I won't go there. Which is really about getting, and you as organizations need to think about this, is getting the right people with the right skills at the right time, the right motivation, yeah, in place. And that is very much a science. It's not by luck, it's by design. So start to really think about that. And if anybody's interested, we're up the back at the end, and I've got a couple of books and insights that we can help with that. But really, that's about it. People, engagement, innovation, and productivity will save the world. If we want to retain our position in the world, whether it be as individuals, whether it be as organizations, and whether it be as society, we really need to think about this. Let's talk about the emerging workforce. Here's something that I'm very, very aware of. But actually, they think, and my wife's a psychiatrist, but she works in the field of medicine, and she does a huge amount in this area. But they reckon, and you might want to shoot me down, that the first person that will live to 150 is alive today. I've got a 5-month-old son, and I'm thinking, God help you, you know, you're going to be alive at 150. But if you actually look at how medical technology has evolved over the years, this could be true. I mean, I'm kind of, well, I won't tell you what age I am, but do I want to, not very, very old, do I really want 3 times what I am just now? Can I see my, no, hopefully not. But yeah, they reckon, and the other thing is, and I'm kind of looking at my pension calculations going, and I'm not one of the, anybody on a final salary pension scheme? No, no, there's not. But I'm looking at my pension calculations, and the reality of it is that I'm going to need to prepare for a world where I'm probably going to need to have an income until the age of 90 and maybe even 100. And what effect has that got if you extrapolate that out with the money in the economy? And the second thing is the 6 generations at work. It's really quite scary. We've talked about the feminization of work, but what I next want to talk about is something that's very close to my heart in terms of inclusiveness within the work environment. And this is a little bit of a test really around, one of the things that we've done a lot of work on, and you can look at it on the web, is around taking people with autistic spectrum disorder and bringing them into the workplace. And that has revolutionized SAP's development environment. And I was out in Washington, and I was privileged enough to see the team out in Washington, and they are amazing people. 1% of the population is on that spectrum, which is quite incredible if you look at the population of the world, 1%. But here's a little bit of a quiz, and we'll kind of wrap this up. So here's some people that are actually on that spectrum. Does anybody know who this chap is? Absolutely correct. It's Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook fame. Yeah, he's on the spectrum. Next chap, Bill Gates. The Wright brothers, inventors of the plane. If you go to Washington, you can see the original aircraft, very worthwhile. That's a plug. Richard Branson. And last but not least, Andy Warhol. So when you think about autism and you think about what that means, have a look at some of the videos. Just put in SAP and autism. It's amazing what can be done. And one of the things that I think we need to do is we need to look at humankind and what everybody can bring to the table. Because some of the advantages we've seen from this have been absolutely incredible. So the next thing is around the war on talent. And what I want to talk to you about a little bit is that the war on talent, from my perspective, is not the fact that we will have not enough talent in the world. We're going to have, and you see this in terms of the percentage of individuals that are going to university. You see how the emerging economies are trying to catch up. I mean, I was privileged enough to go out to Korea a few years ago and actually have a look at some of the learning that's going on there. Absolutely incredible. But the one thing that I notice is that the evolving of skills is just incredible in comparison to what we had even 30 years ago. It's just unbelievable. if you look at what's happening in India with education, and I'm not saying it's perfect, but if you look at the number of graduates coming out of graduate schools with PhDs, and then you look at what they're going to the US. I mean, our development office in Washington, I would say 60% to 70% of the people in that building are from the Indian subcontinent. Absolutely superb people. So you've got to look at, right, it's not about the fact that we're not going to have enough people with skills, it's about getting these people in the right place at the right time. It's the equation that I gave you earlier. Talked about the machines on the march. There's a book, if you're interested in this, which I found really, really interesting, which is The Race Against the Machine. And it talks about how to alleviate the impact of technology on you as an individual and obviously on your organization. So if you haven't read The Race Against the Machine, I would highly advise you to look it up, get a copy on your Kindle, and give it a go. There's also a cheat sheet at the back if you just want a synopsis, just out of interest. And finally, this is where we're going as an organization on our journey, which is around using people analytics. And it's giving data insights, but it's not metrics. I mean, we've got metrics coming out of our ears. Who thinks here that they actually do people analytics as well as they do financial analytics within their organization? One. Where do you work?
I work for myself.
Oh, you work with yourself. Perfect. Anybody else? Yeah, you do it for others. Excellent. Well, I mean, this is not a plug, this is reality. You absolutely need to get a handle on this stuff, yeah? It's becoming more and more important in a competitive environment. There's lots and lots of books on it. My manager, a chap called Tim Ringo, has just written another book, a follow-up book on his on analytics, but there's a lot of very good material out there. And there's also a lot of really good technology out there that's worth experiencing, whether it's from SAP or other organizations. This is going to make the difference to your ability and your organization's ability to survive. The book that I'm talking about is Calculating Success. It's a chap called Tim Ringo. He's been involved in, he's an American chap, but don't hold that against him. He's been involved in analytics for around about 30 years. And what he did was, his first book, which is this book here, was around going into a number of organizations and implementing analytics solutions. But the second book that's about to be launched is going back into these organizations and looking at whether they actually delivered what they expected to deliver. Yeah, so I think the follow-up is probably going to be more powerful than the original, because at the end of the day, it's all about results, isn't it? Did they actually get the returns that they expected? So another plug for another book, Calculating Success. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about cloud-based HR and collaborative strategies. And I'm not going to specifically look at SAPs in particular, although the screenshots happen to be, but I think there's a huge amount that we could do in this area. And a lot of it's to do with the fact that if you look at what most people, and I'm talking about my mother who's 83, she's using Facebook. That's how she keeps in touch with, you know, her family, and my brother, myself, her cousins. They're around the world. This is how she keeps in touch. So she's got this iPad, she's keeping in touch. But young people, even if you look what they're doing in school, which really worries me, because I mean, I don't think their ability to write is maybe what it once was, but they're using a lot of this technology. So when they come into work, my goodness, I mean, I go into organizations today who have got on-premise solutions that are kind of, you know, 15 years old. And these people, which are great, I have to say, for the frequent user, but for somebody that wants to go in and dabble now and again, it's a nightmare. It's all shortcuts and codes and all this kind of stuff. So they're using this, and then they're going into the place of work, and they're going, my goodness, what on earth is this you're using? So I think everyone will use cloud at work soon, whether we like it or not. And there's a lot of reasons behind that. But I think a lot of it's to do with the maintenance costs, a lot of it's to do with the accessibility, a lot of it's to do with the ease of use. And a lot of it's to do with collaboration. And this is an example screen from the SuccessFactors suite. And if you're using SuccessFactors, that's great. But there's a lot of very, very good technologies out there. and you look at what you've got. And I've got this within my own laptop, I've got it on my iPad, and I've got it on my phone. So that ability to look up who's in my team, what they're doing that day, what learning they've got, what performance measures they've got in place, what projects they're on, all of that can be done from one screen, no matter what the device is. Looking at some of my trending data, so this one, the overall termination rate voluntary for your group is too high, so you can set up different analytics that you're pulling out on a weekly, daily, quarterly, whatever it happens to be, but that ability to have that directly on your phone. The ability to get your metrics, the ability to get your information, lots of org charts, directories, whatever you might be, setting new goals, updating your existing goals. But people want that anywhere, anytime, any place. They don't want to have to go back to an office, plug into a system, and then get it there. Does that make sense? And that, I think, is what's driving modern cloud technologies. It's just ease of accessibility work and access to the specific metrics data. So Billy, to kind of wrap up, and just a few takeaways. The first one is back to that equation, and if I leave you with anything, it's right people, right skills, right place, right time, right motivation. Get a hold of Daniel Pink's book, have a read through it, get a feel for whether that's changed your view and how you motivate individuals within your organization. People engagement, innovation, and productivity. This really is the equation that could turbocharge and make the difference between an organization that fails to adapt and dies, or an organization that changes, grows, and is still absolutely at the top end of the world economy going forward. Any questions? No questions. A lot of writing. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for coming along. I'm going to be here, and at the back, we've got the rest of the SuccessFactors team. If you want to ask anything, even if it's just to take my email and get some of the book recommendations, I can send these out, or you want a copy of the PowerPoint, I'd be very, very happy to do that for you. And thank you very much, and thank you very much for coming. Thank you.